So that's a little bit of background about how I grew up. So when I had this friend in high school who was almost as free range as I was. His family came down from Chicago when he was like 12. And he turned 14 about 2 weeks before I did.
Dog on me. Go on. Feed it.
Got his 5-horse motorcycle license, what they call it, what do they call it now? They still got it. There were limitations on it. The motorcycle was not supposed to be more than 5 brake horsepower. You were not supposed to exceed 35 miles an hour. You were never supposed to carry a passenger. You weren't supposed to be out after 9 or before 5 o'clock in the morning. We ignored all that shit. And I bought a 500cc Triumph at a garage sale in Collinsville, Oklahoma for $50. We had to put together. I had help with it. He had a Norton Atlas that he'd inherited from his dad, 14 years old. Now, I don't know what y'all know about Norton Atlases, but in 1967, they were the fastest production motorcycle built. They were actually quicker than the Commando because they were lighter, but they had the same engine in them. But he also had a little 100cc Yamaha that he bought. So we're at his family's house in that little town in Mingo, out there by the Mohawk Park. And we were both already working. We both had motorcycles. We had these licenses. And I said, I want to take a road trip on a motorcycle. Now, I'd hitchhiked all of it. I'd never been very far on a motorcycle, maybe 10, 15, 18 miles, back and forth to work a little bit. And his dad was he was one of those that's like, yeah, you guys should do this shit, you know. So he got a map out, and his dad was a machinist, and he got out a compass. And he said, okay, we're right here. You guys have $27 a piece. Gasoline was 19 cents a gallon. So you can go 130 miles and not be out of money. And he drew a circle. And Cedar Vale showed up in the circle. No idea. I'd never been here, never heard of it. And Joe said, let's go there. I said, okay. So we ride up here. Now, I don't know if you've ever ridden a really old 500cc Triumph in a rigid frame. 20 miles is an endurance contest. How the Brits did it, I have no idea. His little Yamaha was actually, he rode,
Still upper lip.
he was on his little Yamaha, and it was actually a better touring bike than my 500 Triumph was. It was smoother. It wasn't as fast, it was smoother. We get up here, we've got a tarp, and we've only spent about $3 getting it. We've still got like $24 a piece. And we're in town, and back then we're probably 11 or 1,200 people here. We walked into a store, and I asked somebody, is there any place we can camp? And they said, yeah, you can go down to Hewins Park and camp. So here you got two 14-year-old kids on their first motorcycle adventure, and we turn the corner. We come down, we're coming down the main drag, and we hit the road, and we come down to this corner, and we look down there, and you see this pavilion. I'd never seen anything like this pavilion in my whole life. You know, even in like places like Los Angeles, they don't have stuff like this. This building, if you really studied this building, it's built like a dirigible barn. We think it was completed in 1910, but there's some conflicting records. It may be a little older, maybe a little bit newer. So we slept on the ground, got up the next morning, went and got something to eat, went home. Nobody said anything about money. They didn't ask us for any money. Nobody said anything. So it just kind of became, of course, then I went off to the Air Force. I made 4 or 5 trips up there, went off to the Air Force, and didn't come back here until 90 or 91, maybe. I was coming with my birthday, And I was sitting in the house in Muskogee, and I had a big old Airhead RT. And I thought, I want to go to fucking Cedar Vale. I got here, I walked in the cafe, and the first guy that saw me said, "Where the hell have you been?" Hadn't seen me in, what, 17 years? Longer than that. 19 years. So I just kind of went from there, and I've just always come here. I come here 2 or 3 times a year. There are old people here that remember me from back then. They talk about, I sit in this pavilion one time for 3 days watching it storm. And the guy who was the deputy living here in town would come down and get me every day and take me to the cafe so I could get food, because you weren't leaving here. It was raining so damn hard. And that was later, that was in like 95. Nobody knew where I was, no cell phone, I couldn't call home. Everybody was worried sick, and I used somebody's phone, and I made a collect call, and I said, I'm in the pavilion in Cedar Vale, Kansas. And the person I got a hold of said, "Where the fuck is Cedar Vale, Kansas?" I said, "Well, it's, you know." So anyway, there's nothing exciting about this story. It's just a little bit of personal history. If I could have figured out how to make a living here, I would have moved up here years ago. But if you're not a rancher or you own a business here, you're screwed. There's no, you can hear that humming going on over there. Hear it? That's a feed mill. That's the only business in town to speak of. And they don't employ but 6 or 7 people. But I have watched this town die, and it kind of makes me sad. You know, I've watched it go from, hell, the first time I was here, they had 2 car dealers, 2 implement dealers, 2 restaurants, a movie theater. One of the larger spring rallies, we were all downtown, and one of the old timers walked up, and he knew me, and he said, you know, and there were probably 30 Moto Guzzis parked along in front of the museum, and he said, you know, back in our heyday, on Saturday night there would be 200 cars parked up and down the main drag in Cedarville. And he said, I bet combined they weren't worth as much as all these bikes are. And I said, these aren't Harleys. Probably the most expensive bike there that year was